Hello, Pacific Coast Watchers, and welcome to the Operations Brief. This is our first episode of the Operations Brief. We're going to run the Operations Brief on usually in sometime on midweek, and run the Intelligence Brief on Fridays or Saturdays. And the difference is the Operations Brief is going to discuss all known operations of the PLA and Allied navies, a bunch of other things, more current news, where the Intel brief is going to discuss people, strategy, technology, and the tactics related to the ongoing situation in the Indo Pacific. Um, so let's go ahead and get to our map today. The first thing up is the carrier battle group centered around CV-17, the Shandong. Has been sighted. They left Port Hainan Island a few days ago. They were sighted Monday by the Taiwanese Ministry of Defense. They're reported 60 nautical miles southeast of Cape Illunabi. She has three escort ships and a supply ship. Unfortunately, the satellite isn't quite good enough to give us a bead on what kind of ships she has as an escort. But we do know that the ship that's right here is a supply ship, an oiler, coming along for fuel. At the same time, we had a surface action group come down from the north, and it was sighted on Monday, 87 miles northwest of Mayako Island, sailing towards the southwest. They sailed in two groups. The first group consisting of the destroyers Baotao, Shaoxing, Ningbo, Honghe, and Yixing. The second group was 143 miles northeast of Tashio Island, headed south, and it included the destroyers Fushao, Shenzhou, and Ximin. And you're going to have to forgive me on my pronunciation. I'm doing the best I can with this one. Going to have to get used to this. The Shandong group is being shadowed by a Taiwanese destroyer, the Keelung. And the surface action groups, all these destroyers, are being shadowed by a task force from the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force, which is located approximately here. That task force includes the missile frigate Nisharo, the oiler Towada, and the minesweeper Hiroshima, excuse me, and also is being accompanied by several P-8 aircrafts making overflights and keeping an eye on this. Now, there's several things that are possibilities here in what's happening. We're also seeing an increase in aircraft, which we'll get to in a minute, in the Taiwan Straits and going down to where the Shandong is. So this could be a exercise where they go ahead and blockade the island, simulate that, or the other option, and this has happened once before in another exercise that they've done kind of similar but not this large, was actually simulated strikes against the island of Guam down here. It's a U.S. Air Base, Anderson Air Base, and a major maritime port. Now, I kind of did some extrapolation. Now, of course, this is all theory, completely theory. I do not have headings of these vessels, speeds, or have any idea of their intention. I'm just going off the fact that they have done this before of simulating strikes against Guam, and what would be needed to do that at this point. Assuming the point up to the north here, this RP, this would be a rendezvous point for where those two groups are meet, because they're expected to link up just based on position and course out of the Taiwanese and Japanese government. This point is roughly 1,265 nautical miles from Guam. Now, at that point, for the CJ-10 cruise missiles, that can be fired from the VLS tubes on the ship, they're actually in range at that point. The CJ-10 cruise missiles have an approximate range of 1,500 nautical miles. Like I said, we're only 1,200 away. So they're already quote unquote in firing range for Guam for those. Now, the questions are going to come, I know, of, well, how many missiles could they fire if this was an actual wartime scenario? And the answer is that there's no way to know. With VLS tubes on a ship, they can be configured to take on all kinds of missiles. And normally it's a mixed load because you don't want just all strike missiles, because you also need air defense missiles. So there's no way to tell how many that they would actually be carrying. I do know each missile has a 500 kilogram warhead. Almost messed that up and said kiloton. Not quite. So their missile range is once they get to that RP point. Now, the Shandong also carries an air wing of J-15s. Now, J-15 fighters are multi-role fighter bomber. They're fairly old, and they have a combat rated let me try that again. Combat radius of about 810 miles. So that's to be able to go out to that point and back. So if they were going to strike Guam, and they carry the KD-88 standoff land attack missiles. Each one can only carry one. The missiles range is only 108 nautical miles, and that's 200 kilometers. And the thing about that is that that would require the carrier to get to this maximum launch distance in the middle of the Philippine Sea. That would require the J-15s to fly all the way down here to this point, and that's the maximum range. That's launching missiles at the edge of the range in order to hit Guam. So it's possible, it's a possible scenario. But I'd also see if this was a real scenario. In another day or two, you'd see them moving towards that launch position for the aircraft in the middle. And then you'd see a bunch of H-6 bombers from the mainland because they can carry those CJ-10s, and they can carry 4 of them per bomb load. So if we were actually going to see a real attack on Guam, we'd see a whole bunch of air activity from the bombers, which we haven't at this point. Leads to believe, and there's no reason at this point that they would be attacking with this. This is more of a exercise because we're not seeing other signs of movement, which I'll get to that in a minute. So let's take a break from that and head up north here. And one thing that came up just as I left work this evening before I started the recording was the North Koreans have launched 2 cruise missiles, and they've landed somewhere in the Eastern Sea here. It's interesting that they've done this because Kim Jong-un has arrived in Russia in order to have talks with Vladimir Putin on arms sales. So it's kind of the first time ever that they've conducted missile launches without Kim being in the country. There's some speculation, although it's way too early. We're only about 2 hours into where the missiles, from when the missiles have been launched. But there's some speculation already that his sister, has oversaw and ordered the launch. But we shall see. We'll get more information on that as the day goes on. Over here in Dalian, we have the CV-16, the Liaoning, which is the Japanese, or excuse me, Chinese aircraft carrier. And I'm going to bring this up full screen. This is a satellite picture that from the 8th of September. Most of the other satellite pictures I have are from the 10th, but had cloud cover here in Dalian on the 10th, so I took the image from the 8th. But she is still right here. It's very blurry and kind of hard to see until you get used to the shapes. But it is in a dry dock in Dalian. It's been going undergoing a refit for quite a few months now. But one thing to notice about this picture is that the dry dock has been flooded, and that means that she's going to be out soon. They're putting the finishing touches on it, and then going to pull her out. Down below here in around Shanghai, we have CV-18, which is the new Fujian aircraft carrier. This is the new one that's under construction, and she has been out for a couple of engine tests where they've literally backed her out into the river behind her in order to do some tests. As you can see, she is still in the dry dock. They have removed the covers. I'll show you a couple other pictures here in a second from the catapults, which is a good sign that they're. And we've also seen some engine tests where we've seen smoke coming out of the stack. So she's getting really close to beginning sea trials. This is the most advanced carrier that they have, and what's interesting is the Liaoning was originally a Russian aircraft carrier that the Chinese bought when the Soviet Union collapsed. The Shandong CV-17 was the Chinese attempt of actually building a copy of that ship. But CV-18 here, the Fujian, is the first one that they've built all by themselves and designed all by themselves. There's a lot of speculation on where a lot of the plans came from, simply because things like the catapults on board are stolen, are pretty much guaranteed to be stolen U.S. designs. They're called EMALS catapults, and they're electromagnetically launched. And these are the same catapults, supposedly, that are on the U.S. Ford aircraft carrier, and that's the first aircraft carrier in the U.S. that's ever had them. So here you see the Fujian in the dry dock, and there's other construction activity going on in various portions here. The dry dock that she's in happens to be on the flight path for the airport there. So there's a lot of pictures that come out on a fairly regular basis, so we get to see. These white strips here, those are the EMALS catapult launchers. The other thing that was controversial here a couple of weeks ago was everybody was concerned about the flight deck and said, oh, well, this is such low quality, the flight deck had a crack in it. Well, it turned out that wasn't the case. That was just fluid that was over there, and by the next satellite image, it was gone. So you'll see that out there sometime. Just fun fact, this white ship, you're going to see that in the ports of all the aircraft carriers. Those are cruise ships that have been converted to barrack ships for the crew. So the crew can live on the cruise ship while the aircraft carrier is being constructed, and you don't have to get in the way and have people in bunks and things like that while you're trying to run cable and build the ship. And they use that for any time that they go into dry dock. just kind of interesting fact. Let's see, I think I got one more picture here. Nope, that was it, just the two. So, right across the river, let me zoom in a little bit here, and you have to forgive me, I'm having some trouble with my Google Earth. It's not a censorship issue or anything, I'm just having a connectivity issue. But we'll get that straightened out. In dock here, September 10th, is 2 of the 3 active Type 75 amphibious warships. Now, these ships carry about 900 troops, along with a whole bunch of helicopters, landing craft, things like that. They have 3 in active service. Right now, I know these 2 are stationed here. However, I have no clue where the 3rd one went. It was supposed to be set up, according to Chinese public announcements, that each theater command was going to get one of these ships. The Fujian Theater, or the Central Theater Command, rather, has 2 of them. I haven't seen where the 3rd one is. And so if anybody can help me out with that, please let me know, because I want to add it and make sure we're keeping track of it. But I was discussing earlier about the Shandong and not having, pointing out the fact that this was an exercise, or this is an exercise versus an actual attack. And that's part of the reason I say this, is because these ships would be an active part of it, along with what they call roll-on, roll-off ferries, which allow vehicles and amphibious trucks. They're actually civilian ferry ships is what they are. But the back ramp has been reinforced, so you could drive an armored vehicle off, an amphibious armored vehicle off, and be able to go to the beach with it and back, and use it as a fairly small landing ship. You're not getting a ton of people on there. These Type 75s are the largest as far as capacity goes for ships. And if you've looked at a previous video that I put out about the challenges of actually doing an invasion of Taiwan, that's one of the things I discuss. And there's a chart there that has all the different amphibious warfare type ships and what their troop capacity is. And so I do know that there's a 4th one being built, and it's still in the formative stages, so we're not quite there yet. So we got these 2, and one's missing out in the ether somewhere. But given the fact that these guys aren't at sea at the moment, and we haven't seen activity in Fujian in the ports, we haven't seen those roll-on, roll-offs massing at any particular point. The invasion is absolutely not imminent. So we go down here into the Taiwan Straits and talk about the daily grind. You've seen if you're a member of our Facebook page, which I highly encourage, you'll see a post where I'll post this map, and only thing I say up at the top is I call it the daily grind. And I don't even post them every day, to be honest with you, because it's just an everyday thing. What it is that the Chinese send a number of aircraft, and the number varies. And quite honestly, I guess the way you would want to call it is that they vary based on how angry they are. With this exercise starting up, we're seeing large numbers of aircraft coming in. And that black line in the middle, this map, I should start there. This map shows you the flight paths of planes, PLA Air Force planes, that breach what's called the median line. Unofficially, there has been this median line, which is this black line going down the center here. Um, and that is kind of the unofficial border when things were the status quo. The Chinese really never crossed it before, um, and neither did the Taiwanese. Um, that's all changed within the last couple of years, and they started doing forays across this median line. Now, in the media, you're going to hear a term, and I want to explain it because a lot of people really get this messed up. Is they talk about the air defense identification zone that Taiwan has declared. Okay, the ADITS is this black box, the entire black box, which, frankly, when you're talking about this kind of thing, it's you can't have an air defense identification zone over another country. It just you just can't do that realistically under international law. And 80 air defense identification zones are declared by a country out to X nautical miles from their territory. And all it is it's that country saying, "Hey, if you're going to be in this zone, we need you to be talking to our air traffic control folks. We need you to be able to identify yourself and state your intentions so we know that, hey, okay, I'm just an airliner passing through, or I'm a jet fighter and on a training maneuver or something like that." What the air defense identification zone is not is territorial airspace. Um, I keep hearing on the news, oh, well, China's violated Taiwan's airspace. No, that has not happened, and hopefully it won't. Um, the airspace and the sea space only go 12 nautical miles by international treaty out from the coast of the island. So, like I said, at no time have the Chinese violated sovereign airspace of Taiwan. Now, there's a couple of little small islands um, that's closer to the coast of China, and yes, this can be argued. If you really wanted to split hairs, okay, well, maybe they flew over the island at one point, but that's not really the point of the matter. The point of the matter is they've never violated the main island of Taiwan's airspace. Um, now, air defense identification zones are fairly common throughout the world. The U.S. has one out to, I think it's about 250 miles out into the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic, matter of fact. And this is when you hear about the Russian bombers. They're coming in and they're flying into our air defense identification zone. We launch fighters and shadow them while they're in the air defense identification zone. It's fine. It's okay. It's okay under international law. It's still international airspace, even though it's a air defense identification zone. They can be there. We are just putting out there that, hey, we want you to talk to us and let us know you're there and what you're up to. And Taiwan does the same thing. So we've had a lot of. Actually, I need to bring that picture up just one more time. I did forget something. One thing that I wanted to point out is you have all these that are running just into the line. But then you have this that's coming out. Now, this is Monday's map. On the way home, I got Tuesday's map and I didn't have an opportunity to update Google Earth. You're going to have to forgive me for this one. I'm recording this at almost 2 o'clock in the morning Central Time. So I didn't have a chance to update it. But Tuesday's map does show more air activity coming out this direction of the island. Now, I'll put that back on Earth so we can see it here. What they believe is that it's air cover going out to train with the Shandong's air wing. This could be using the Shandong as a target. We do that a lot with our own carrier battle groups and things like that. Where they practice attack runs and things like that. But all we do know is that they're coming down, they're coming around the bottom of the island and training with the Shandong. All right, moving on. Let's go back up here real quick and talk about the strait real quick. Let's see here. It was Monday, I believe. Let me look. Yep, the Japan-based destroyer USS Randolph Johnson, DDG 114. She's an O'Reilly Burke, and Canadian frigate, His Majesty's Canadian ship, Ottawa, which was a frigate, passed through the strait after drilling with Japanese ships in the East China Sea near Okinawa. And that was Friday, went through. Now, there's a lot of discussion of, well, all the activity that we're seeing from the Chinese Navy and from the Air Force, that's all in response to that. I don't believe that's true, simply because of the fact that this is a major exercise. I'm showing you the surface action groups and the carrier battle group, but Taiwan, the Taiwan Ministry of Defense says that they've spotted a total of 20 ships around the island, and the Surface Action Group and the Shandong's battle group don't account for all that. And that's just a lot of firepower to put out and see. I think by the time it's said and done, once we start seeing charts out of the different foundations who are able to track it much better than I am, we're going to see another practice of blockading Taiwan, which will be a subject of another intel brief at some point. And I do have the numbers here from Tuesday the 12th, that there was 35 aircraft around the Air Defense Identification Zone. 28 went through the Bashi Channel to train with the Shandong, and the Bashi Channel is right through in here. Zoom out a bit. It covers, the Bashi Channel covers the area between Luzon in the Philippines and in the southern part of the Taiwan island, Formosa. So you had aircraft that were coming through in here. So I don't believe it's two destroyers are causing this much action, that much firepower out and about. Somebody's planned for that's not just something that you just snap your fingers and things happen that quickly in the course of 2 days. All right, we're going to come back up here in a minute, but we're going to go down to the Spratly Islands and just take a quick look at the what we have down here. This is Scarborough Shoal, and this is within the Filipino Economic Exclusion Zone, which is not a territorial sea. It's just an economic exclusion zone, which what that means is that the Philippines are entitled to all the resources and being able to fish and whatnot out from about 200 miles from the coast. Now, of course, all this, remember, is hotly contested. This is the South China Sea. So you have, the 9, or now they're starting to call it the 10-dash line that the UN Court of Arbitration struck down, but China still claims it. So Scarborough Shoal is just a small little island here, and I hope it's going to be a little blurry because of my technical problem. But it's a small little shoal here, and within that's actually a better picture there. But we've got 2 Coast Guard. Oh, it connected. Yay. We got 2 Chinese Coast Guard vessels and 2 likely maritime militia ships. that are just hanging out. Now, the Maritime Militia is also going to be something of a further intel brief video. But to give you the quick explainer of them, the Maritime Militia is a fishing fleet. However, they don't fish. They are paid by the government, and it's usually staffed by the ships are usually manned by veterans of the PLA Navy. They are armed. Usually, it's just small arms, maybe like an RPG, handheld type weapons. Combat is not what they're there for. They are there to be the eyes and the ears of the Chinese Navy. And they also have assisted, if you saw my video on St. Thomas Shoals and the Filipino resupply mission, you'll see a lot of the blue fishing ships in the pictures and video that went along with that, trying to block and sometimes ram the Filipino Coast Guard ships. They say that the maritime militia ships, the newer ones, are double hulled, and that has a reinforced bow, so they're good for ramming other fishing vessels. And they have actually rammed a fishing vessel, a Vietnamese fishing vessel. And luckily, there was a Filipino fishing vessel that was close by and actually picked up the crew of. Or actually, I'm sorry, I'm incorrect. That was the other way around. They rammed a Filipino fishing boat, I think it was a year or two ago, and there was a Vietnamese fishing boat that picked up the crew and brought them to safety, thankfully, because the Chinese just took off and left them there to die. Scarsborough Shoal, there's nothing built on it. They haven't done any sort of reclamation. And I'll get into this island a little specifically more on another Intel Brief video. There's a lot of videos to be done about this place. In 2016, how the U.S. tried to broker a deal and failed miserably. But anyway, the Filipino fishing boats aren't allowed to come here. When they come here, they're actively blocked and harassed by the Maritime Militia and the Coast Guard. One thing I would like to point out too is that we know these ships are here a lot of the time, the Coast Guard and Maritime Militias, because they run something called AIS, which is an automatic identification system. Okay, now this can be turned on and turned off. There is that capability to it, but a lot of times the Chinese like to keep it on to show their presence. They're in what they consider their sovereign territory, and they're allowed to be there, and they don't mind people knowing it. Now, one strategy that's come into play for quite a while was you would see like the Filipino Coast Guard trying to go to Second Thomas Shoal, or fishermen go into Scarborough Shoal, and you'd see the maritime militia ships try to run them off, block them, whatnot. And if they couldn't handle it, then the Coast Guard would get involved. And the Chinese Coast Guard would come out and, as we saw a few weeks ago, use water cannons. They've used lasers. There's a whole playbook of things that they do in order to keep you out of there. If that fails, what we have seen is usually about anywhere about 100 miles away from any given Coast Guard cutter. There's said to be a PLA Navy destroyer, an actual warship, in the neighborhood too. So if things escalate, of course, now you don't see him on AIS, but they have been able to detect him via satellite and other means. So if the Coast Guard gets into trouble and is failing at its mission, the naval destroyer can come in and provide support too. So that's Scarborough Shoal. And like I said, it's very interesting because Scarborough Shoal has some very significant strategic issues for the Chinese, and I can see why they want it. Put it that way. Let's see over here. is Thitu Island and Reef, and again, forgive the pronunciation. But again, we have several maritime militia and Coast Guard that's actively patrolling over there. And let's see, where we go here. Then we have it's not cooperating with me. Okay, well, we'll just miss that one. But this is Subic Bay, or Subic Reef, excuse me. And they've reported many maritime militia. Unfortunately, they've had some cloud cover over the past couple of days, so they haven't been able to get good satellite photo or get a count. Let's see, over here. This is Mischief Reef, I believe, if I recall correctly. Yeah, Mischief Reef. So a lot of the base, unfortunately, is hidden under clouds. But all three of these islands have military facilities. These are 3 islands that were reclamated and created by the Chinese and built bases on it. And again, that's yet another subject for the Intel brief. But at this point, they can't see much because of the cloud cover, but AIS says that there's multiple ships in the area. But take a closer look at this. This is the runway for Mischief Reef, and the Chinese have built up all of this. None of this was here in 2016. And you can see even with the Google Earth picture here, which was dated back in early 2016, these are all the reclamation ships, and they just kept on building around. But one thing that's interesting about Mischief Reef, and again, we're going back to the video about the Second Thomas Shoals, is it's only 30 miles away from Second Thomas Shoal, where the Filipinos try to resupply. So the Coast Guard and the maritime militia ships can hang out at base, go to the go to the cafeteria, whatever they want to do. They don't have to be sitting out there waiting, because they can tell that that the ships have left from the Philippines. This is Palawan Island here. This is there's a couple of ports here, I believe, and this is a nice resort area from what I've been told. But you'll see the boats coming out. They'll get them on radar, and then they'll run the militia and the Coast Guard over there. So just kind of a thing how that works. Down here, we have the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Monroe, who's been doing some law enforcement work with the Indonesian Navy. They've been teaching different things about fishery management, boarding practices, anti-piracy patrols, things like that. They've been down there a couple of months. All right, the last thing on the agenda here, or I'm sorry, almost the last thing. One more ship, the USS Ronald Reagan. They've just gotten done with a few days of a few weeks of intensive exercises down with the Indonesians and the Malaysians, and they have finally pulled into Yokosuka naval activities there in Japan, so they're back into port along with the battle group. Let's see here. Another interesting facet that came up in an article this week, it's been kind of ongoing, but these 3 air bases, the Chinese have made major improvements to these air bases. Things like putting hardened aircraft shelters in, um, uh, expanding aprons and capabilities, moving different aircraft there that haven't been stationed there before. And it's worth noting that these are the airfields closest to Taiwan. And as Longtang there is actually only it's the article says 217 kilometers. That's about 135 miles from Taipei. So that's a great staging base that you're really going to want to have, regardless of what you're planning, whether it's going to be a blockade, whether it be an invasion, or what. Um, One of the landing beaches is actually right up in here. So to have air support like that is a pretty huge deal. Um, these aren't the only military facilities that they've been upgrading, but these are the ones that were discussed in the article. And then, let's see, last but not least, up here in the East China Sea is, or actually, I'm sorry, it's the Yellow Sea up here. To give you an idea, just say you have this is South Korea, this is North Korea, China, and Russia. And of course, all this is China as well. The USS America is a amphibious assault ship. There's 3 ships like it in their group, but they are going up. They have about, I believe it was about 1,900 Marines in the group. But according to news reports, the America will be participating in an exercise with the South Korean Navy, the Royal Canadian, and the Royal Canadian Navy in the Yellow Sea from September 15th to September 19th. Now, I think there's some other countries that are going to be involved in this, but they're building it as the largest exercise ever, that close to Chinese territory. So it's going to be very interesting to see the response to this. I kind of wonder if that's why we're seeing the flooding of the dry dock for the Liaoning. You know, are they going to launch that aircraft carrier and make her part of a group to shadow the America in the exercise? The other thing that's kind of interesting to note too is that this exercise is going to be conducting amphibious landings around Incheon, South Korea, and it's happening almost 80 years after the original on the same dates. So I thought that was kind of cool to honor the Korean War veterans that way. But that is all I have for this evening. Well, this evening, I shouldn't say that. Don't know when you're listening to this. But I hope you liked this video and found value in it. If you did, please remember to give a thumbs up on YouTube here and click the bell to receive notifications of new videos. To continue the conversation and to view other content, because we post a lot of content on Facebook. A lot of it's raw, information coming out of a lot of foreign media sources. I do my best to find reliable sources from overseas that write these articles. I also take articles. If you're interested in writing one, we have quite the international audience. So if you're interested in writing and posting an article to the group, please feel free. But please come and join us on the Pacific Coast Watchers Facebook group. It's a private group. You do have to apply to it. But as long as you have a legitimate page, usually we're pretty easy on letting you in. The link will be in the description below. Now, I do have to say that I have not been on YouTube long. The Facebook group has been running for over a year now, but the YouTube channel is new. I just gotten to the point where I can start doing these videos. So the Facebook doesn't allow me to point a direct link at this time. Once it does, it'll be a little bit easier, but right now it's just in text and you're going to have to copy and paste. All right, with that, I think we've covered everything and we will see you next week.